Can we take our seats, please, so we can begin the morning or the balance of the morning program, please? Thank you very much for coming this morning, and we're now going to have a conversation about the future of technology, but we have some very specific questions and very specific goals, and for a description of that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Commissioner Ginsburg.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer, or Commissioner Bauer. Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much. As we've gone around the country, we have been overwhelmed with the comments from election administrators at all levels about the challenges they face with technology in the future. So we appreciate all of you in the industry coming to join us, and we have some very specific requests to make of you, which is we really do want to talk about the future of technology. We all know you have wonderful, wonderful products. We've had the opportunity to see them all, so we're not interested in the specific products you have now. We are interested in looking to the future and answering the questions what jurisdictions with limited budgets will be able to do with their machines as those machines get increasingly older. And so we would very much appreciate your thoughts about technology in the future, because there are many of you, and we do want to have a robust discussion over the course of the day. We would ask you to limit your remarks to 5 minutes per company. We'll be a little dogmatic about enforcing all of that. But again, we look forward to what each of you has to tell us about the future of the companies. So with that, why don't we dive right in, and Professor Gilbert, would you please begin?
I'll begin with saying that I'm not a vendor. We've created a technology called Prime 3 that brings me here today, so I appreciate you all having me here. With respect to the future of technology and voting, from my perspective, I have basically three areas that I'll comment on briefly. One will be, I do think we will see a shift, and we're starting to see this now in design of voting technologies towards what I call a universal design, meaning the notion that we previously have seen of having an accessible machine and then a machine for everyone else. I think that is going to go away in the future in voting, that we're moving towards a uniform machine that has accessible features that can be used anytime. So that's my first comment. Then the second area, we saw this in the presidential election, and I think had something to do with you all being here, is the time it takes to vote and voting lines. I think we're going to see an insurgence of technology created to address voting lines and voting times. We've done research in this area, and we know there's certain methods and things you can do to address voting times and voting lines. So I think there will be innovations and new technologies put into this area. And then the last area, I think, voting technology we're going to see advances in the future and innovation. I do think, with respect to UOCAVA voters overseas, there's been this issue of security and voting, internet voting. Which I agree with, meaning that I don't think it's possible to submit a ballot using today's technology securely back in the method that most people think of when you say internet voting. However, I think you can submit a ballot in a different way and having a physical ballot being created on the other end in real time. So I think there will be advances in internet voting, but it won't be in the traditional sense of submitting a ballot like I go in and submit something for my checking account. I think it's going to be a more interactive experience. And again, we've done research in this area and prototyping that suggests it can be done securely, meaning you can't change the outcome of an election undetectably or change someone's ballot undetectably. So those are the three areas I think we'll see advancements in with respect to innovations in technology and voting in the future.
Sorry I was late. Thank you for having us here today. I think the work that you're doing is really exciting. As I look through the mission that you have and the problems you're trying to solve, they're the same missions. It's the same mission and the same problems that Everyone Counts has been trying to solve for over a decade, and we think we've made good progress. So I'll share with you a little bit about some of the concepts that we think make the most sense. When you look at improving election administration, one of the key things, obviously, is process, but technology is now available and has been in other industries for decades that can help improve those processes and add auditability, security, accessibility, and frankly, simplicity to the processes. Elections, we believe, are one of the most mission critical and important business processes in the world. And in fact, business process improvement has been done, as I said, for decades in other industries. So we think that one of the key things is to not think about manual and paper processes as standalone, to not think about voting systems or poll books or election management systems as one-off products. Purpose-built hardware isn't used in any other industry except maybe airlines, and that's still backed up by software, and it's the software that makes it work. So what you can get today because of technology really is perpetually state-of-the-art systems. If HAVA were to be funded again, then what everyone would worry about is, what do we do in 5 years? Because 13 years after HAVA, or 10 years after HAVA, most things purchased have reached their life expectancy in 10 years. Not just the hardware, but the software. When you build something once and expect to use it again and again and again, it begins to become antiquated, not just because processes get changed, but because technology advances. There are systems in use today, voting registration, election administration, that aren't compatible with today's operating systems. So some election officials can't buy new PCs because their systems aren't compatible on anything more advanced than Windows XP. So this isn't something that we think about just with voting machines. It's something you have to think about across the board. So a software as a service model, whether it's for voting, for registration, whether it's for poll book or auditing and tabulation, is really important. As I was saying, if HAVA were to be funded again, it could buy something that can be perpetually state-of-the-art. So in 3 years, it isn't going to be broken. So you can use a software-based voting system anywhere. As some of you saw when you came into our room, a voting machine today could be an iPad, an Android tablet, or a PC, or your mobile device. You don't have to have long lines where people in states that can't vote early have to go in and mark a 20-page ballot while 70 people are standing behind them, or 700 people. Instead, you can use express voting. You can vote on your tablet. A QR code can let you go into the express voting line, and suddenly your ballot is there and submitted instead of having to wait. So if you think about what could be done today, think about what you are doing every day with all of your other systems and services. And one thing I would also suggest is, in thinking through what to make a recommendation on going forward, I think it's important that we actually have the hard but important conversation about what we accept and what we want. Because we can all sit here and have a paper versus electronic debate, but the reality is we all know this can be hacked by anybody. And some good electronic things are harder to be hacked. But we have to decide if we're going to have the conversation that is, everything we do now is just fine, or actually it's not, it's just familiar. And it's really important to make the decision in advance if you're going to accept that what we do is good enough or not. If you're not, talk about what could be and what is happening everywhere else. If you are, at least acknowledge, we know it's not good, but we're going to pretend it is. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I want to follow on with those comments as how we think about our history, but how we look to the future. Throughout our history, there's been a slow but deliberate evolution in who was allowed the franchise and the methods by which they could make their voices heard. As populations become more diverse and dispersed, it became necessary to find ways for voters to cast their ballots remotely. The first absentee voters were Union soldiers during the Civil War, who were allowed to vote by proxy through the mail. But absentee voting by mail wasn't generally adopted until about 1963. This is an indication of how slowly voting technology changes, and should. And that remained true until November of 2000 in the presidential election in Florida. That near statistical tie and subsequent difficulty in recounting punch machine ballots led to the passage of HAVA, and that law required the replacement of those punch card machines with new technologies, either direct recording, electronic systems, or paper-based systems that scan the electronic ballot. This required expenditures of millions of dollars across the country, and for the newly chartered Election Assistance Commission to establish the standards and to certify those voting machines. This has been a very successful process over those past 13 years, but now we're seeing the end of that and where we need to go. Now, as was just previously discussed, there have been some great advances in the opportunities for things like internet voting, online voting, but a few scientists have spoken up, questioning the security of a voting system that involves a home computer, transmission over the internet, and tabulation by election officials. The claims of insecurity are picked up by the media and the government agencies and used as an example of why online voting cannot be pursued. The International Foundation for Electoral Systems identified the greatest threats to integrity of electoral systems as systemic manipulation, electoral malpractice, and fraud. By far, IFAS found that the most likely of these was electoral malpractice, just human error in the electoral system. Essentially, human error in any system is most likely cause of bad outcomes. Fraud is far less likely. In the U.S., between 2002 and 2005, hundreds of millions of votes were cast. In that same period, there were 95 cases of fraud prosecuted, with only 5 instances of multiple voting resulting in conviction. The human error in that period likely prevented millions from having their voices heard. The fear of the remote possibility of fraud is being used to allow the probability of electoral malpractice to proliferate. There has to be a better way. This commission was chartered to examine and propagate best practices in election administration. This presumes that the current practices are adequate to meet the needs of a dynamic population. And if we could just skim the cream, then all elections administrators' practices would improve. The impetus for this, of course, was the report of long lines at the polling place in election 2012. According to Professor Stewart's survey of performance for American elections, the nation's average waiting time on 6 November was only 13 minutes. That being said, when 105 million people waiting 13 minutes each equates to about $500 million in lost productivity of the nation, there has to be a better way. Anecdotal information indicates that the primary cause of the delays in voting were problems with check-in at the polling place and, in some states, unusually long ballots. Lengthy ballots are a challenge imposed by legislatures, and they can be the solutions. The proximate cause of check-in problems are errors in voter registration databases caused by poor handwriting on paper registration forms, poor transcription of the forms into the database, and a lack of data in the paper-based poll books. The solutions are straightforward. Online voter registration eliminates most of the transcription areas, and electronic poll books allow each polling place to have the full VR database to best direct votes. Still, our practice is to conduct elections on a single day for a fixed number of hours. The introduction of mail-in absentee ballots in '63 and early voting after the turn of this century has done much to distribute the volume of voting to these other mechanisms. Today, we're seeing nearly 50% or greater of electoral exercising a non-election day option. That is that better way. The last version of UOCAVA and the MOVE Act, signed by the President in 2009, authorized UOCAVA voters to receive their ballots electronically. Based on the experience of serving their military and overseas voters, the state of Alaska implemented an electronic ballot delivery, on-screen marking, electronic ballot return protocol for all of their voters. The files are converted to paper at the election office upon return and then tabulated. Long line in Alaska in November are not just a bad idea, they're potentially fatal. Other states have implemented versions of this for their UOCAVA voters, and expansion to the rest of the population seems forthcoming, just as Maryland has done. Cash-strapped states across the country are facing enormous financial investments in new voting technology, and because of a lack of legislation, bureaucratic inertia, and purveyors of fear and uncertainty, we're trapped in legacy technologies. In some cases, such as the city of New York, we're taking steps back to lever machines. There is a better way. The state of Alaska has found a way to make ballots available at the speed of light to all voters via a secure system that eliminates residual votes, protects anonymity, and provides a verifiable paper trail to include scannable ballots while reducing congestion at polling places by never leaving the comfort of home and hearth. This is a current best practice and the better way. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Rogers. I'm the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for Election Systems and Software. I'm joined here today by my colleague Ken Carbolito, who's Senior Vice President of Innovation. We may share this microphone at some point. Thank you to the members of the Commission for the invitation to be here today and for the opportunity that you provided to the vendor community to comment on the future of voting. Following the November 2012 presidential election, much has been said about the future of voting. Very little, however, has been said as to exactly when is this future that we speak of. While development, testing, and certification have a defining impact on the availability of new technology, it really is market needs which serve as the ultimate driver. When will the bulk of today's systems require replacements or upgrades? For some, that time is right now. For others, it's post-2016. For those jurisdictions who replaced systems in recent years, their replacement could be 12 years or more away. So in truth, there are really three future scenarios. There's the future today, the future in 4 years, and the future after the turn of the decade. So how do we, as providers of these voting systems, address a future that essentially begins today and yet must be adaptable enough to bridge to tomorrow? The first key to that is flexibility, coupled with experience and capability. Not every state, much less any jurisdiction, will require the same configuration of voting systems. Unique geographical voting trends across the nation are emerging with greater speed in the last 10 years than was experienced in the last 3 decades. One size of voting technology has never fit all in this country, and it's very doubtful that it will for some time. Providers of future voting systems, whether that future is today, post-2016, or somewhere in the next decade and beyond, must be able to provide end-to-end technology capable of interfacing seamlessly with all facets of voting market trends. Now that we've discussed this future that we speak of, let's focus on what users tell us they'll require when they select that future voting system. Inevitably, you will hear customers, manufacturers, academics, and many people at this table speak of systems which should be transparent, secure, auditable, interoperable, diverse, and sustainable. Well, we believe those aren't really system requirements. Those are actually system necessities. So if all of those requirements are considered baseline necessities, what does the future voting system really look like? That answer is as easy as it is complex. Many jurisdictions will continue to require purpose-built hardware designed to serve the traditional polling location. Others will require central scan solutions designed to count mail-in ballots. Many will require far less hardware in the future, and they'll begin to rely more fully on systems which send blank ballots via an electronic means. Some jurisdictions will completely depart from traditional voting, and they'll seek systems which allow voters to make their selections at home and then bring those selections to the poll, perhaps via a mobile phone or some other device with barcode capability. In the future, pre-printed ballots may soon be as forgotten as those printed checks that you once carried in your wallet. Regardless of the form of voting, all future technology must be capable of rapid throughput, employ uncomplicated and basic interfaces for voters, and provide low maintenance for those jurisdictions who own them. Today's future has already shown us that voting technology will be required to utilize multiple channels to meet the needs of any voter in any given place or time. The key to success will be the ability for an elections provider to bring these multiple channels of voting into one seamless operation that's able to cover every voter, from your polling place, traditional polling place voter, to the sight-impaired voter, to the voter in the war zone, to the voter who may have been displaced in his or her home due to disaster. Not only must a company be able to provide for every facet of voting, they must have the flexibility to quickly adapt to meet a jurisdiction's needs as they themselves transition from one trend to the next. At Election Systems and Software, all of our systems are developed with multi-channel voting in mind. An election provider can no longer simply be a purveyor of a product, but rather they must understand the entire ecosystem of voting and provide systems that are flexible enough to bridge to the old channels of voting to the new ways of voting. Just like the voices of consumers that have played a bigger role in the creation and adoption of consumer products over the past 50 years, so too will the voices of election administrators and voters play a much bigger role in the creation and adoption of voting systems in the future. In short, this means that election providers must provide voters and election administrators far more choices than they do today, with greater flexibility, so that the very same goal that we've always had, accurate and protected tally of votes, can be achieved through a means that are convenient, user-friendly, trusted, and secure. Basically, this means better elections for everyone. Thank you.
Hi, my name is McDermott Coots. I'm the Director of Research and Development for Unison Voting Solutions. I actually do have a presentation that I was going to pop up here real quick, but in the interest of time, there is only one slide. And let's get right to it. This is the responsibilities of a voting system and a voting system vendor: accessibility, accuracy, auditability, reliability, and security. None of these should be new to anybody standing in this room. But what we have to take a very close look at is, how does technology apply to each of these items? It's always been a watchword of mine that technology itself does not solve a problem. Technology, if just applied willy-nilly, will just make your problems show up faster. So what you need to do is take a good look at what your processes are, and then apply technology to the process in order to make sure that you are improving the experience of both the voter and of the people who are running the election. So what does this mean for the actual future of voting? Well, first of all, one of the key items that we need to look at is certification. Certification provides a very important baseline in each one of these levels. Basically, what are your minimum requirements in order to be a solid voting system? Now, after that, you have to start looking at what are the requirements of your different audiences. What are the requirements of a voter? What are the requirements of your election officials? The voter is going to require technology that they use every day. They're only going to be going into the polls 1 to 5 times a year. They need something that they're familiar with, something that they can use, something that they are going to understand intuitively. For the audience of the election officials, you're going to need, they want speed, they want accuracy, and they want to be able to audit the system clearly from end to end. So these are the areas that we're really focusing the technology on, but what the specific requirements are, those are still being developed. We're doing things today, we're doing things tomorrow, but this is the past, present, and future of election technology. Now, we do have some additional challenges that are somewhat unique to the voting industry. One of them is, and these are things that the standards do not keep pace with technology. We're dealing with issues of hardware and with security. These are things that change every day. I can't get the same computer next week that I got I can't get that today that I got last week. So how do we speed up that process while still maintaining the solid baseline of requirements and standards that we have in accessibility, accuracy, auditability, reliability, and security? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Penelope Chester. I'm the Sales Projects Coordinator for Dominion Voting Systems, and I'm here with my colleague Ed Smith, Vice President of Certification and Director of Supply Chain Management, and we'll be sharing the microphone this morning. Yes, thank you. Okay. So looking at the last 3 or 4 decades, the optical scan tabulator emerges as the longest lasting, most trusted and effective voting technology. And even though our lives currently are increasingly digital and screen-based, perceived security issues with DRE systems, once thought to be the future of voting technology, have supported the further development of optical scanners. Indeed, the VPAT requirement in many states brings us back to this need for a physical audit trail, which the paper ballot is. So in terms of future trends, Dominion believes that the same kinds of expectations which drive innovation in other industries, the demand for greater transparency and openness, also applies to the future of our industry. For vendors, this will mean stronger than ever audit mechanisms, greater transparency and openness in the way we operate and in the way our systems work. Another trend which will drive our industry is the increased expectation of convenience through the diversification of voting channels. And in this context, we believe it's important to at least open the door on the internet voting debate. There is now an entire generation of young people called digital natives. And while they may not be voting today, they will be voting soon, and their expectations might be different than the current generation of voters. It's, in our view, counterproductive and an abdication of civic duty, actually, to ignore the subject and simply say no. Online ballot delivery, as other colleagues have remarked, has already been identified as the way forward in the context of UOCAVA. In addition, many countries, not all successfully, have begun testing, implementing, and supporting the development of online voting. That said, as far as our company is concerned today, and as I mentioned previously, the optical scan tabulator will remain the key technology for the foreseeable future. In addition to the trends previously identified, transparency, openness, and convenience, accessibility and designing system with accessibility in mind has been a driving force for innovation and research and development in the industry and will remain so. As an example, as many of you have seen this morning, Dominion's ImageCast Evolution is the first all-in-one unit, which combines a tabulator and a ballot marking device, allowing all voters to use the same machine and the same ballot regardless of their ability. As our population ages and as our society seeks to mitigate the impact of all kinds of disabilities, vendors will need to continue to design systems to serve these needs. This means not just people with disabilities, not just people in a wheelchair or with vision problems. This also includes pregnant women, senior citizens, people with limited English language skills, or people with limited literacy skills. Dominion believes that as far as accessibility is concerned, the future of voting technology includes the full realization of the HAVA mandate for privacy and independence in the voting process.
Good morning. I'd like to expand on some of the previous commenters' remarks and on, I lost my slides, and on other comments around auditability. Auditability has become an increasing demand. People want to know that that optical scanner really read the ballot in the way that the voter intended. And indeed, we see discrepancies when there are recounts and canvassing situations. So we're seeing more of a movement to the digital scanners with their ability to take a full picture of the ballot and make those ballot images open to all candidates, campaigns, interested citizens, as we've seen, for instance, in Humboldt County, California. That's better transparency. It's more open. Citizens can be more sure that the people who actually were declared the winners should indeed have been declared those winners. And furthermore, related concept is software verification, ensuring that the units have the proper firmware, that nothing's been added, taken away, or modified, same with the application software in use at Election Central, that once again, nothing's been added, modified, or taken away. Audit logs underlie the auditability. There's much better logging due to efforts at the EAC in recent years to enhance what we see in the 2005 VVSG and certainly what you saw from the 2002 FVSS. What we do see as a future trend is a consolidation, merging, work through the common data format. There's some folks here associated with that effort to bring audit logs to a common data standard so that interested citizens, candidates, campaigns can better access those logs and make use of them. So in conclusion, we've heard a lot about technology. We've heard a lot about process as well, you on the commission especially, and those need to be married up, and both areas need improvements. Vendors have responded to market needs in the past, and we're going to continue. I'm not going to belabor that. My colleagues have already spoken to those in detail. We do see some needs for the common data format work to continue and go forward to aid the technology. And we're just going to see nothing but more increased scrutiny of the systems, and so they have to be more transparent. We see that as a trend as well. And one thing that my colleague Penelope pointed out to me—
We are going to run a little short on time.
all right, I'm on my last sentence, thank you, sir, is that many industries are affected by game changers that came completely out of the blue from unrelated industries and technologies. What does that look like for elections, for election administration, the technology and the processes? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Eddie Perez. I want to thank Mr. Bauer and Mr. Ginsburg and the full commission for the invitation to be here today. And as my slide presentation is coming up, my disclaimer is my comments this morning are really going to be particularly on the demand side of what we see as far as expectations in future technology. So what I talk about might sound a little more abstract, but I'm going to run through this quickly. So those of you that have heard Hart talk before, we are trying to take a very disciplined, human-centered design approach to our new voting system. We have identified and we're very serious about focusing on 3 specific values, which are usability and adaptability and transparency as far as what we think future technology demands. Today, what I want to do, though, is I actually want to advance that discussion, because another really, really critical part of thinking about human-centered design is the fact that it's going to change. If there's one thing that we can say about human beings, it's that they are restless, they are creative, they are demanding, and they're always inventing new things. And some of them are truly revolutionary. So the first thing I want to say as far as the approach is that when we think about the proper approach to future technology, human-centered design is not only focusing on these 3 core values of is it easy, will it last a long time, and is my system working correctly, and how do I know? But again, we need to assume that humans are going to be fickle and they're going to be creative, and that's part of our challenge to try to get ready for. So let's turn then, if that's the approach, to the solutions. The picture that I want to paint here is one of going from a kind of point-to-point, more static way of thinking about voting and the election experience to something much more robust. It's a little bit like going from the model of a brick-and-mortar retail store versus the dynamism of a connected World Wide Web. Up on the screen, this is the way a lot of people think of voting today. I go to the library, I'm going to pick a paper ballot, or I'm going to vote on an electronic machine, I cast my ballot at the end. And what I posit is that in the future, more and more people are going to think about the overall election experience in a way that looks something like this, which I call a kind of many-to-many. What's been so revolutionary about the internet— the telephone was a point-to-point form of communication. Mass communication, radio and television, is a one-to-many. Well, with the internet, we suddenly have this proliferation of inputs, access points, incredible opportunities for participation. That's what's revolutionary. But what's even more revolutionary is this idea that emerged back in 1999, and this idea of an Internet of Things. And what I mean by that, I don't want to take it too literally. Don't get hung up on the idea of internet. It's that the many-to-many connections and the way that people expect it today, it's not just computer-computer, it's to device. It's people with their smartphones talking to their cars and getting online to get their voter service information and so forth. So this is the vision of this idea of an Internet of Things, anytime, anywhere, by anything. Today, so much of the industry and the way we think about voting looks something like this. But it seems to me when you crowdsource and you ask people what do they want in elections and in voting in the future, it looks a lot more like this. When they think about public services, they're thinking about a level of connectivity and access points that's far beyond anything we've done. So this is the idea of many-to-many. This is more participation on more devices with more modalities. That's what I mean about restlessness and creativity. When you have forward-thinking places like the International Foundation, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, or Los Angeles County doing open idea searches, if you just ask for the demand from people, what do you expect in elections, they're not talking about the brick and mortar place. They're talking about online voting. They're talking about the things my colleagues have mentioned, downloading a ballot from the comfort of your home, using familiar, accessible technology. They're talking about mobile vans and so forth. This is the idea of many to many, and I think an important way to translate it, I started with the values of usability, adaptability, and transparency. Those words in another way, usability is access, adaptability is innovation, and transparency is openness. Those three values, I think, is fundamentally the direction in which our solutions need to be going. And those are complementary with everything you hear about Government 2.0. So if that's the approach and that's the solution, what are the obstacles? And then I'm just about done. As my colleague from Unison pointed out, one of the biggest challenges is that our standards and our institutions are not keeping up with the pace of change. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to get the standards in line with the innovation. This diversity of choices and this demand for more devices and so forth is sometimes in conflict with a flattening thrust of the standards. The fact of the matter is having more requirements that are more complex, that are more costly, and that take a long time, that drives in a direction of fewer configurations, not many. The second issue is we need to get our laws in line with the innovation. Laws across the country in these 50 states, it's up to those legislators to decide the extent to which they're going to support, restrict, or complicate these questions. It has to do with changing outdated, unusable ballot designs, questions about voter access, registration, who gets an absentee ballot, and so forth. And finally, right-sizing the technology is going to continue to be a challenge for us as manufacturers. One of the hardest things to commercialize a system is the trade-off among all the values: access, convenience, security, cost, you name it. So in conclusion, we have 4 specific recommendations. As a manufacturer, they not surprisingly speak to the standards. I want to acknowledge there's a lot of really good work going on in this area today. There are ways that